Welcome back. Since June, Mott Haven families have come together on the corner of 138th Street and Alexander Avenue every Sunday morning to advocate for Black lives and voice their collective concerns through activism, mutual aid, and family-friendly events. Joining us now to share more is Jason Epting, an organizer at Mott Haven Families. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I gave a little bit of a background on Mott Haven Families, but can you tell us a little more about the initiative and your Sunday morning events for those who are not familiar?
Absolutely. We're a collection of families. We're a diverse group of people that live in the Mott Haven area. We just really believe in family. We believe in the best for our community. We want the best for our children, but the best for everybody's children and their families. And so we got together over the course of time, trying to find ways to connect. And we just came together and we focus on joy and creativity and just trying to do the best we can and be neighbors to the people around us. Our idea is that we want to partner with other organizations who've been doing great work, but also start some other work to make sure we're advocating for our communities. And that might be in education, healthcare. It could just be like having opportunities for us just to have fun and get to know each other. We wanted to do all those different things. It just so happens that the Sunday events came about after the protest that came after the George Floyd death. There are protests all over the country, as you know, but we were very proud that there were protests in the South Bronx, and there was protests here. And based on what happened on June 4th, where the protest came to the South Bronx and came down 136th Street, we were just mortified by the actions of the NYPD, and we just felt like we just had to do something for our sake, for our kids' sake, and for our neighbors' sake, that we won't just take this laying down.
Thank you, Jason, for the background. On the same stream of the protest that happened during June 4th, can we discuss the current state of affairs between the Mott Haven community and the police at the 40th Precinct in particular, especially after, like you said, peaceful protests took a violent turn on June 4th in the community?
Right. So first of all, I'll just tell you quickly what happened June 4th. June 4th, as we were standing outside, we actually had the opportunity to witness what happened. There were peaceful protesters that were walking through, they're chanting. We didn't see anybody being a ruckus or anything like that, but as they're walking down the street, we noticed that there was, after they walked by at around 7:40-ish, after they walked by, we saw twice as many police officers come behind them, and all of them from different kind of uniforms, meaning that they're from different departments all over the New York City. You can tell they looked militarized. They had bikes. They just looked like they were ready for war. At the end of that block, they kettled them, which means that they just corralled them, and there wasn't an opportunity for them to move. And at the end of that, at the time that 8 o'clock came around, Mayor de Blasio's curfew went into effect, and that's when I would say chaos break loose, where officers were hitting people with batons, standing on top of cars, hitting people with batons. They actually assaulted a few nurses. I saw that there were doctors being arrested, legal observers being arrested. People who were supposed to be there were pulled out, and then it seemed like the violence all came from NYPD. And just being a witness to that and just knowing that that happened in my community and the community that we're trying to build to be a safe and happy place, it just was horrendous for us to see that. So since then, we've had a protest for the last 4 months, just talking about needing and asking for accountability, asking for transparency about what happened those days. We've seen a few things in the news, but we just haven't gotten enough to get our demands met. So we meet in a family-friendly way every Sunday, where we're having our kids and ourselves protest these, brutalizing protesters from the people that we trust the most. So it's been a great run for us because we've built community through it, but we shouldn't have to come together on these terms for somebody we want to make community with as well.
Right. And Jason, this past Sunday has been a little different for Mott Haven Families because, as we know, there was a recent Blue Lives Matter rally that took place on the same corner that you usually get together on, no?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what occurred and, about the counter protest that you held there that day?
Well, we didn't feel that we were not going to stand for a Blue Lives Matter rally with their racist rhetoric of Blue Lives Mattering and those things coming into our borough. Even if June 4th never happened, that was something that we're going to make sure that we stand up with our neighbors and making sure that those kind of things cannot happen in the neighborhood that we reside, especially considering all the disparities that happened with the South Bronx and the Mott Haven area. What actually happened that day was it seemed like there was a rally that was supposed to happen where they were going to talk about unity between the clergy, unity between the police, and then unity with the community. But what I saw missing was there's only like maybe 10 people there, and it felt like it was like the speakers and a few organizers. They were missing the key component, which is community. And actually, on our side, where we're counter protesting, that's where the community was. And it didn't seem like they're trying to engage with us in a way that they wanted to build community. It was more or less like patting police officers on the back for doing a good job, when really, I just think with patriotism, the best thing to do is, if you are going to be about your police department or your country and those things, you really have to look at what things are great, and then also look at the things that aren't going so well, and look at ways to be efficacious in making them better. So we had probably about 60 people. They had about 10 to 12 people, and they had speakers. It was very peaceful. We set the tone very well, but there are reasonably people who are angry, who are talking to some people who are engaging with some of our people. But we felt like we made a stance of like, we are definitely not just going to allow you to come here and just say, hey, we're doing a great job, when you are leaving open wounds with June 4th happening. And on that too, it's not just June 4th that we're talking about. When the CCRB, which is the Civilian Complaint Review Board, released their data about officer misconduct, the 40th precinct where we reside, they found that there was 100 charges to be substantiated. That means that officers actually engaged in misconduct. And guess who the majority of those victims were? They're blacks, and blacks don't make up the majority of our neighborhood. So we know that there's something to it. We want to look at this through a lens of like, let's just get better. But we are not going to stand for people just changing the rhetoric so that we're following suit with some of the other tricks that are being portrayed right now in the media.
Thank you, Jason. So a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of conversations that didn't exactly happen the way you planned, almost, with the community there that day, regardless of, the fact that the community was on the flyer for the event. The community didn't feel involved in this said rally, Can we also learn about the community's demands moving forward, not only in terms of policing, but in terms of housing, healthcare, and education with Mott Haven families?
Yes. The way that I look at it is like, we want it all. Like, just looking at the decades of marginalization that the South Bronx has encountered, our main purpose was to be in neighborhood with everybody else, but also we want the best for our neighbors. Me being an educator, I want the best schools. I want to make sure the best practices are being executed, that grade level materials are being put in front of every single student so that they can actually make it there and beyond, so they have the opportunity to be on grade level and beyond and be high school graduates, and beyond. Healthcare, we want the best of healthcare, and we obviously want to see that less death rates for our women who go into the hospitals, especially to have babies and then they die. I mean, we want everything. We want clean air for our kids and ourselves. We have the highest asthmatic rates in all of New York City, and I would say even the United States. You can quote me on that. But I just think that we want the world and we're going to keep plugging away for anyone who's trying to do these things. So Mott Haven Families wants to mobilize with other organizations who are fighting for these things, and they do that really, really well. But what we want to do well is be sure that our community knows about these different things that we have going on. And lastly, what we demand accountability first and foremost for the people who are involved in it, for whoever pre-planned this response to peaceful protesters or for protesters themselves. We want people who were part of it to resign or to be fired. We also want to reinvest resources into. We want now, with these things that are happening to happen all over time, we want actually concrete terms where we can see money being poured into our community. Right now, if you ask the residents, they're like, hey, we don't even have stuff that we had 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, they saying that they even had more, but now all the money is going towards the police and floodlights and uniforms and barricades and those things. Actually, we'd like to see less of that, defund the police in that regard, and give us more money for better schools, better healthcare, to develop the waterfront like you see in other parts of New York City. All those different things are things we want, and we're going to demand them. We're going to keep fighting for them.
Right. And as we know, Mott Haven has been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So these are all, demands that are equitable. Like people need these things in the community and should have access to them. Jason, before we go, can you share the importance of activism and community connection in the midst of the pandemic and, all this trauma that we're going through collectively in the community?
Right. The way that I look at the activism, it was definitely a reason. With the pandemic, a lot of us are in the house a lot, and we're like kind of rebuilding ourselves, rebuilding our families. We're getting in touch with who we are. We are being very humble because we can't control what was going on with with COVID and what was happening actually in the South Bronx or across the nation for that matter. So at that time, it was a humble time, but also it kind of propels you to make sure that you're doing things for other people. It makes sure that you're doing things for yourself and standing up for the things that actually are right for your environment. And we got to see a clear difference of how things play out in the Bronx and how things played out in other places. And we felt that this was just a reason for us to come together. We're not just going to sit idly by and just hope everything goes well. It was a lifeline for us. It was a lifeline for our mental health. It was a lifeline for us to give of ourselves and give of our gifts so that we can be healthier and know that we're giving an impact to this world. Because I think all of us have changed through. I can speak for myself and I can speak for my Haven's family. Everybody has changed through the pandemic, but also changed with the deaths of George Floyd and changed into the way that we want to become who we want to become, the nation that we want to become. So we started to act those things out. So these activism, now this has propelled us to do this forever, but this was a way to actually push us there, and it was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Jason Epting, organizer at Mott Haven Families, for sharing this today with us.
Yes.
Folks, you can follow Mott Haven Families on social media on Instagram at Mott Haven Families. They meet every Sunday morning between 138th Street and Alexander Avenue at 10 a.m. We'll be right back.